All right, looks like my camera isn't coming up. Give me a second on that just to make sure everything's cool. Okay, there we go. Hello, and welcome to 5 Design Patterns with Typescript. So excited to have you here. As you can see, we've got the Design Patterns site up. But before we get into that, let me just go through a few things. Thank you, of course, for spending a little bit of your Friday with me. And I hope you have as good of plans for the weekend as you can have in the middle of a pandemic. This one is all about you. So if you have any questions at all as we go through these, just pop them out there, and we'll see where we get to with it. And I hope that you learn something new. I'm pretty excited about it. I know that I did a video on design patterns on Traversy's channel middle of last year, which is great. Got a lot of good response, but I didn't put any code into it. It was very kind of high level, hand wavy, and so I think it's great that we're kind of coming back at it here. Oh, and before I sort of dig in again, obviously we have our rocket in the back there. You can go on to the Discord server. There's a link to that in the description, but I'll put another one in there so you can jump on in. Hi, Isaac. Good to see you. And you can change the color of that rocket ship anytime you want. And I just want to thank, by the way, Nuraj Matani, sorry about your name, brutalizing it there, but for bringing up the idea of doing a video on design patterns. So that's what was the genesis of this. And so your ideas do count. So thank you very much. And thank you very much for that idea. So let's talk a little bit about design patterns. This is the original design patterns book. It was released in 1994. I think I read it in 95. It's a fantastic book. The idea is that there are the same way that an architect has, and I'm talking about like a house architect, has, basic construction layout for what a good house, how a good house is constructed and how the parts and pieces fit together, where the bathroom should be, where the living room and the kitchen should be and all that. We have similar sorts of things in how we construct software in what are some pretty time-tested patterns that people can leverage. So they have the book separated into 3 different big parts. They've got creational, which is things that, ways to create objects. Structural, these are ways that, things, the components fit together. And then behavioral, which would be, kind of temporal things like, commands and stuff like that manages state over time. One thing I would say, let's not overemphasize the whole object-oriented design part of this, the OOP part of this. Certainly in TypeScript and in JavaScript, we're not gonna use necessarily classes unless we need to. So a few of these we'll do with functions, a few we'll do with classes. As we go, we'll see. Hi, Jack. How you doing? Okay. So I've got a little starter thing here. We're going to go make an in-memory database. That's kind of what we're going to design or look at different design patterns around. That actually comes from an interview I heard somebody had to take, was basically, design an in-memory database and then kind of adding on to it from there. So we're going to look at a bunch of different patterns. We're going to look at the factory pattern, the Singleton pattern, which is incredibly popular, the observer pattern, or what we now call pub/sub, publish and subscribe, which is obviously huge. And then there's also the visitor and strategy pattern. And if we get through all of that, I'll actually give you one more and make it a full 6. So we'll see. We'll see how we go. Hey, Alex, good to see you. Happy Friday. So happy to have you here. Is it okay to use both class and function with state in the same component? Oh, interesting. Well, like when you're talking about React, yeah, I mean, I guess you could use a class-based component as part of a subcomponent, and you could use a functional component. Sure, no problem. But we're not going to do React in this one. We're just going to talk about just generic TypeScript. So the first thing we need to do when we talk about building out an in-memory database is to define what we want the interface of that database to be. So we're going to define an interface. We'll call that database. And it's going to have a getter, which is going to get by ID. I'm just going to go bring over my code here so I can make sure I don't go down a rabbit hole I can't actually get out of. It's going to get an item by ID. And what's it going to return? So we need to have some sort of type. What kind of things are we putting into our database? So we're going to use T and say that we're going to make this generic. So we're going to learn some TypeScript generics, which is great. And we're also going to have a setter for our, that's going to add something to our database. We're going to use, it's going to be an ID-based database. It's going to be like NoSQL. Hi, random. And it's going to be looked up by ID. So we're going to have some sort of data coming in, a new value or a new object. And that's going to come in as that. And then it's going to return a void. But in order for a set to do that, new value has to have an ID. So we're going to create a thing called base record that has an ID in it. And we're going to say that whatever this is, it needs to at least extend base record. So that basically says that, hey, you got to at least have an ID in whatever you're going to put into this database. Okay, so let's actually create an in-memory database of that. So I'm going to create a new database. I'll call it in-memory database. And it's going to implement, if I can ever type, the database with the given record or type that we want. And it's going to have in it a private database of where you have a record. That has a string as the ID, and then whatever that type is. And I guess at this point, we're going to need to say that we have T on there. This is not 100% what we're going to do. So, okay. All right. And let's see, we're going to have a setter and a getter. So let's do that. Cool. And what's this going to do? This is going to be the easiest thing ever. It's just going to say this.db. It's going to take that new value and take the ID out of there and set it to new value. And oops, hold on. That's not right. There we go. Okay. So again, this is going to extend base record. So we know that we have that. And then to get it, we're going to do this.db and then give it the ID. And there you go. So that should be, in fact, actually, at this point, it should be T or undefined. So there, if you want to pass your interview, that's actually like the smallest in-memory database I can think of. All right, let's go and actually try this out. Let's say, let's go create a Pokemon DB. And in order to use that generic, we're going to say that we're going to use Pokemon. And because it's got an ID, that extends ID on the base record. And there you go. So now I can do Pokemon.db.set and then give it a new Pokemon. Its ID is a Bulbasaur, and its attack is, I don't know, 50, and its defense is 10. And then let's console log out the Pokemon DB, get, and then the Bulbasaur. Yeah, okay, thanks VS Code for hinting me on that. Cool. All right, let's go over here, and then I can just yarn start. Oops, hold on. Oh, I know what I did. I got to remove my node modules. Hey, John, good to see you. Everybody excited? Gonna have a great weekend-ish thing. All right, let's start that up. Okay, cool. So yarn start in this case, all it's doing is just running ts node, which is a TypeScript node wrapper on source index.ts, and there you go. So we can put an item into our Pokemon database and we can get one back out. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the factory pattern. So let's say that I want a way of requesting a database from a global source, and it will either give me, say, an in-memory database if that's the way that I have it configured, or it'll give me a MySQL database, or it'll give me a file-based database. That's the idea of a factory pattern, is that this factory is going to hide which thing that you're going to implement that with, the class that you're going to implement that with, from the code. So let's do that. Let's say function create database. And it too is going to take that base record. And then in here, this is really cool actually. I can just define a new in-memory database like that and return it. This is kind of neat, actually. One of the cool things that we can use in TypeScript. What font am I using in VS Code? Well, let's take a look. Settings. This is the Apollo Midnight theme, and I'm currently using Mona Lisa. I actually think that's a paid for font. Sorry about that. But there are a lot of good open source alternatives, so there you go. Okay, so in order to do that, I'm just going to call create database, and that's going to give me back a Pokemon DB as a class, which is so cool. One of the really cool things that you can do in JavaScript. You can basically create classes automatically, or at runtime. And so what we're going to do is create a Pokemon DB, this time lowercase, and then just do new Pokemon DB. All right, so why isn't that working? All right, let's just call that, oh, Pokemon, nice. All right, I'm not real happy with the fact that it's upper and distinguished only by a upper and lowercase p, but we're not going to leave it that long, so there you go. So that is our first pattern. This is the factory pattern in C++, which is what you'd have when in 1994, when the book first came out. This would be primarily, like a factory would be primarily a class which had mostly static methods on it, which would then give you the instances of those classes depending on what you asked for. So if you asked for it, it would have like a static create database. We don't need to do that, obviously, in TypeScript. You're going to have that kind of public static thing. You could, but I think this is more in line with what you expect out of a TypeScript application. So we're going to interpret our design patterns in the context of TypeScript. We're not just going to go and kind of make C++ classes that are implemented in TypeScript. Okay, so the next one we wanted to look at is a singleton. So we do this a lot in applications. We create singletons a lot, like a Redux store and a React application is a singleton. When we've been looking at state managers, as we've gone through a lot of the state managers over the past couple of weeks, a lot of those are singletons. So what is a singleton? Well, a singleton means that there can be only one, kind of like the Highlander, right? There can be only one. In this case, there can be only one Pokemon DB. So the easiest way to do that in this one would be to have this factory pattern return that singleton. Oh yeah, Fira code is great. I was actually on Fira. Most of my videos, I would say, were on Fira code. I was actually just kind of going around looking for different monospace fonts, and I was like, oh, I kind of like that Mona Lisa one a lot, so I'm going to go buy it. I did actually have to go and tweak this theme, though, so that we get these really nice italics, but it's not that big of a deal to tweak it. And if you want, I can put that up in a gist for you if you really like this theme and if you want to use it. Okay, so let's go and do a singleton here. And there's a couple of different ways to do this in JavaScript and TypeScript. So I think the most native way would be at this point to say that we just want a new in-memory database right now, and we want to return that. And so now we would just have this one Pokemon DB, and you'd have it as an export on your module, and there you go. That's your singleton. So you only ever call this create database once, and away you go. There is a more C++y way to do this. You could actually make the constructor on this private, and then have a static instance of this, of in-memory database, and then just do new in-memory database like that. And then again, let me just change this out. And really, this is just kind of up to you, which way you want to play it. So I'll do in-memory database again like that. And then at this point, I would get back that Pokemon DB, and I could say Pokemon DB.instance. And again, that would make sure that you only ever have one instance of Pokemon. So there are a couple of different ways to do that in JavaScript and TypeScript. Yeah, I'm with you, Flatline. Boy, that is a tough one when it comes to singletons. There's an issue where, you have this singleton, right? And you want to go and throw some data at it and then test it. And then in another test, you want to go and throw some other data at it and then do another test. But you want it to be essentially restarted each time. There is a way, I think, to make just flush out the module cache so you can essentially reinitialize the singleton, but yeah, not great. So there are, I will say, use the singleton with some care. Just like I said in the Brad video way back, the singleton is something you should use a lot of care on. What I tend to do is, if I'm doing something like this single value system, I'll also export like a cleaner function that will go and like return the singleton back to a known origin state, and then I can use that for testing. Okay, so what have we looked at so far? We've looked at the factory pattern, we've looked at the singleton pattern, and this is so good. This is my favorite one. I'm sorry, Random Rabbit. I'm glad to have you here, and thanks for hanging out. We're going to look at my favorite one, and that's the observer pattern. So we know this is event listeners and pub/sub, and there's all of these different words for it. But I'm going to give you actually a really nice pattern for this. So we're going to create a observer. So that's what they call it in the book. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it, as I said, you can call it pub/sub, you can call it whatever. And we're going to create a function called CreateObserver. So this is going to give us a little object that we can then use to publish and subscribe to. If you watch the Effector video that I just put out on Wednesday, I was really inspired by that, by their interface, and this is kind of along that line. So let's go and do this. It's going to return a subscribe method. It's going to take a listener, and that listener is going to have an unsubscribe, and then it's going to take a publish, which is what I'm going to use, or what the publisher is going to use to actually send out an event. So we'll call, event, and then that's going to return a void. But this is not great, typing wise. So let's go and add some types. So first thing I'm going to do is define a type for a listener, and it's going to take an event type, and it's going to then get called with that event type and return void. So that's basically when I subscribe, right? This is the function that I need to give it. I need to give it a function. It's going to take an event type and then return a void. Pretty easy. So let's go and take this event type and also use it in our CreateObserver. So lots of fun generics going on here. So this is going to be our listener with that event type. And then finally, publish is also going to take that event type. So this is a really nice little function here. It's basically going to maintain a list of observers and allow us to publish and subscribe from that list. So let's go and do that. We're going to say that we have a listeners array. Right? And it's going to start off empty. And then we're going to return our, what we want out of here. So we're going to make a subscribe. And a lot of typing on this one. There we go. And I'll just copy and paste that. And it will return a void like that. So what does it need to do? Well, it needs to push onto the listeners, the new listener coming in. And then it's going to return that unsubscribe method. So that's the way I'm going to unsubscribe from everything. And we'll set listener is equal to listeners.filter. So we'll just remove the listener that we just got if they unsubscribe. So it's going to take a listener, and we're going to say, hey, is that equal to the one that we brought in? If so, there we go. Let me get rid of all these lines here for a second by just putting in a placeholder for that, just so we can take a look. Okay, so let me just go through one more time on this. So we've got our array of listeners. We initialize it to an empty array. This is what's called a closure in JavaScript. So this listener is going to be specific to this particular return. And then we're going to return a subscribe function, which takes a listener and returns a, hold on, there you go. All right. Claim some syntax errors. And it's going to return an unsubscribe function. This is very similar to useEffect, the way that useEffect works. UseEffect takes a function, and if that function returns a function, then when the useEffect is, when the component unmounts, then that useEffect is that is returned or called. Well, let me catch up with the flat line here. The gang 4 bucks. They tell you visitor pattern. Yeah. Yes. Well, we're going to get to the visitor pattern, although it's so easy to do in JavaScript, it's really not even a thing. Okay, so there we go. And then all that unsubscribe is going to do is just basically take the listeners and just filter out what we got, and that's just going to remove that particular method from the array. And I think this is actually a nicer pattern than what you do with window or document or element add event listener. You have to give it back the same function again in order to unsubscribe, which I think is a pain. I think this is actually a nicer interface. Okay, so let's say I have an event. I want to publish it now. So I just want to go through all those listeners, and for each one, I'm going to have a listener function, and I'm just going to call it with that event. That's it. That is all that I need to do. So really cool. So what do I need to do? Well, I need to go and try and I'm going to add this to my database. So before you set a value and after you set a value, you're going to get an event, right? And we'll call that one, let's see, before set event. And it'll take a type. And it's going to give you the current value and then the new incoming value. Seems like a decent thing to do. And then with the after set event, that's going to tell you that I updated and just tell you what the new value is. Seems pretty reasonable. So let's go down here and add on to our interface for the database. We'll say that we have an on before add. This is how I'm going to go and add an event listener. And I'll say we're going to have a listener. And here's some fun stuff. So we're going to have a listener. Right? And it's going to take a before set event. Nice, right? So good. And then it's going to return that unsubscribe function. So it's starting to look like STL if you have flashbacks to C++. So basically all we're saying is your listener function should be a listener that listens for a before set event. And then on the after add, do the same thing. We're going to do it for after set event. Now, of course, we don't actually have this in our in-memory database. So let's go and do that. All right, so we'll go down here and start implementing this out. All right, cool. But it's not actually returning anything. So let's actually go and use our really nifty, cool CreateObserver. So we're going to create a private before add listeners. And we'll do that CreateObserver thing. And it's going to take a before set event. Oops. And then an after add listeners. All right, after set event. There you go. Cool. All right, so how do we do a subscribe? Well, we do subscribe. See how nice that is? And then we just give it the listener. Same thing for this. All right. Okay. Coolio. But we need to return that. So we have a way to unsubscribe. And now let's use it. So now we've got a way to listen to stuff, but we have nothing that's publishing. So let's go do that. So before we add, we want to call publish. And see, now we're getting a really nice hint here. So let's see, new value is going to be the incoming value, named new value, which is nice. And then we're going to take the existing value, which is whatever that is. Okay, cool. And then down here, we're going to do it after add. Again, publish. And this time we're just going to give it the value. Well, the new value, which is actually the new value. Okay, there we go. Cool, nice. That is a second bird that's gone in my window in as many days. All right. Okay, cool. So let's actually try this out. So we're over here on set. So let's go and add another one. We'll call it, I don't know, Spinosaur. I think that's from like Jurassic Park 3 or something. And it's bigger. It's got 100 and it's got a defense of 20. It's not very good defense. But in the meantime, we want to go and subscribe to our database. So let's go here. Let's go to Pokemon DB instance. And then on before add, or let's do on before add. Do we want to do that? Nah, let's do after add. It doesn't really matter. And it's going to take a function. That's going to take a Pokemon or a value. Let's see, new value. And we're just going to console log that out. Cool. Now let's see how does it work? All right. Nice. Okay. So, all right. Let me, here. This is a little confusing. Don't need to do that. So if it works, what it should be doing is it should set Bulbasaur, it should set our listener, and then anytime a new one gets added, then we automatically say we output it, which is good. Looks great. And then if we want to unsubscribe, then we can, I guess, call that down here, I guess. But let's put this up front. And this time we'll see that Bulbasaur comes out, and then but not Spinosaur. Let's give it a try. Yeah, perfect. So we are subscribing at the beginning. That's giving us back an unsubscribe method or function. And then we set a value. That's going to fire off our after add. And then we unsubscribe, and then we do some more setting, and it's really, really nice, very clean. So there you go. There's a nice observer pattern for you. I think it's very, very type safe. And it also makes the best use, I would say, of a standard JavaScript paradigm, which is a closure. And that's how this listeners works. You have that listeners is captured essentially by this function or the return of this function. So every one maintains its own list for you. It's very clean. All right. So that's 3 patterns down. We got 2 more to go. The first one I would say is the visitor pattern. So in order to do that, we want to have a way to visit every element in our database. So let's just call it visit. All right, and it's going to take a function. Let me see how I did this before. All right. We'll say it's a visitor, and it takes an item and returns a void. All right, that's going to be a function. There you go. So when you do visit, it's going to go through each one of the objects in our database and send it off to you. So let's do that. Let's do visit. And we'll go down here. And this is really tough. So the object values of our database. So we got a hash, which is a database. And this is just going to get all those values. And then we're going to go through each one of them using for each and fire off to our visitor. It's really that easy. So that's one of the things about the Gang of 4 book and how it fits in with what we do today. The Gang of 4 book being out there in 1994 means that it's kind of in the genesis of a lot of what we've seen, and it's been kind of now built into frameworks. So things like for each are really just the visitor pattern from the Gang of 4 book. And it's really cool because we can apply those to all kinds of different data sets, right? So you can apply for each to, different types of data. So, all right, let me just look over here. Deno and Svelte. Ooh, that's a good combo. I like that. All right, let's go try out our visitor pattern. So let's go down here to our Singleton instance of PokemonDB. And then we will visit each one of those and put out its name. How about that? Cool. So let's do run it again. Nice. So now in the database, we've got the Bulbasaur and we got the Spinosaur, and that just gives us a really nice way of traversing whatever our data structure is. And that's what visitor is supposed to do. It's supposed to hide from you the implementation details of how you've stored everything and just give you a way to, hey, I give you a traversal method, or I give you a method, you call me back with everything you found. So that's the visitor pattern, and it's pretty standard. It's now baked into almost everything we do, along with the publish and subscribe event stuff as well. Okay, and then the 5th one I want to look at is the strategy pattern. And that's because I use this one actually a lot. So the strategy pattern is an interesting one. Basically, the idea is it's kind of a play on visitor and a little bit more. So let's say that we want a way to find the best of the Pokemon in the database and return it. So we're going to say we want the best record, I guess. We'll make it generic. We'll call it generic. That it's or select best. How about that? So of the data in the database, select the best. And so for that, we're going to have a score strategy. We're going to have a way for you to specify a function that, given an item, is going to give me back some sort of number. And then at the end of that, I'm going to tell you which one scored best. Pretty easy. So the first thing I need to do is have somewhere to store all that. So I'm going to create a thing called found, or a variable called found. And it's going to say, well, what's the highest score that I've got, the maximum number, and what was that associated with? So that's going to be the type, or undefined. And we're going to initialize that to 0 as the maximum, and then the item to undefined. And we'll return whatever we found. But of course, now we need to do something with that. So let's go through and look at all the values in the database and then call reduce on that. Now, this is one of my favorite. Reduce is awesome. I love reduce. with reduce, you can basically do everything else. So reduce is going to take the current found value and the item, and it's going to call that score strategy one. So I'm going to say, well, what did I get for the score? Well, I got to call the score strategy on the current item. And then if the score that I got back is better than what I have, then I'll set my maximum to that score and set my item to whatever that was. But of course, we need to initialize with something. So let's initialize with found. And let's see. So why is that not happy? That should be happy. Happy, happy, happy. What does it tell me? All right. F.max. Okay. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to copy this over and see what happens. Yeah, okay. What was my problem? Oh, I didn't return it. That's what it was. Okay, so return F. I think that was it. Yeah, cool. Okay. So this is great. This is how reduce works. Reduce goes through an array. It starts off with your initial value, which in this case is found. So max equals 0 and item equals undefined. It then gives you that value in each iteration along with the item. And then you do something with that item and return a new value. So people use this for adding numbers up. They use it for doing all kinds of stuff. Reduce is actually phenomenal. Hi, JS Coders. So Martin Fowler, let me just check on what Flatline's saying. Yes, Vlad, I will definitely put this code up on GitHub. And Martin Fowler, a new guy around these, not new though, inventor dependency injection and other cool stuff. Okay. Yeah, we'll agree to disagree on dependency injection a little bit, Flatline. I've been bitten in the butt enough times by dependency injection. But I do understand that like React context is basically dependency injection, so that's fine. Anywho, all right, so this is a really cool function now. We got this select best. So what we can do with a strategy pattern is I can go down here and I can say, cool. For my PokemonDB, I'm going to go and select the best by defense. So let's see, I'm going to go, it's going to give me the defense value, nicely hinted there. And I'm just going to return that. I'm going to say, hey, cool. So this is the best defense Pokemon, defensive Pokemon. And then if I were to do this again and say that I want the attack, this would be the best attack Pokemon. And let's make sure that they are different. So, okay, Bulbasaur's got a 10 for defense and spine. Okay, but let's make Bulbasaur have a better defense. How about that? So the best defense would be Bulbasaur, and the best offense would be Spinosaur. I guess that makes sense. Having seen Jurassic Park 3, I can say that that's probably the case. So let's see, console.log. Best attack is going to be that one. Oh, look at that. Give me even the question mark like that. That's nice. And then best defense is going to be that guy. All right, let's run it. See if it actually works. Cool. So the best defense is a Bulbasaur and the best attack is a Spinosaur. Nice. But isn't that a really nice way to kind of hide or make it easy for you? Now you can start thinking about, okay, what's my scoring criteria? It allows you to kind of focus on the problem as opposed to the mechanics of how do I iterate through this database? How do I get all the records? Yada, yada. I mean, I know that we're working on an in-memory database and it's super, super small, but imagine if that was like a big paginated database or like a Firebase and you got to go and get all the pages and all that sort of stuff. It hides all that. It hides all the mechanics of that and all that for you, so you don't need to think about it. All you got to do is think about, hey, what's my strategy here for deciding which is best. So that's a really nice pattern, and there you go. So 5 quick design patterns for you. Let's just go through. So we had a factory pattern, which allowed us to create a generic database that matched whatever our interface was. Actually, hold on. Let me go and add on that so it's complete. Cool. All right. We've got a, what was the next one you did? We did a singleton pattern by doing that instance up here, by making a static instance. As I say, there's multiple ways to do that. You don't need to do that way, but this is a very kind of traditional Gang of Four way to do this. That we then did the awesome observer pattern, and there's this excellent, kind of pattern here that you can use to give it a publish and subscribe. Let's see what would happen if they both had the same attack. Let me just go, and then we also did the visitor and strategy pattern, and let me let's see if they both had the same attack. I am going to guess that what's going to happen is it's going to be Bulbasaur, because the first one in is going to win. So let's take a look. Yeah. So Bulbasaur wins. And the reason is because it's one little thing here. If score is greater than F max, then we set it. And in this case, 50-50, where both values are 50, it's not going to be greater than, it's just going to be equal to. But if we did greater than or equal to, like that, I know it's a little hard to tell. It's a ligature, but basically equal to or greater than. And then it would pick the last one. So in this case, it would pick Spinosaur. Hope that helps. But yeah, so really cool pattern there. I've used strategy for a bunch of different things. Basically, if you want to kind of separate concerns between the stuff that iterates through data versus the stuff that manipulates the data, the strategy pattern and the visitor pattern are great ways to do that. Okay, well, it looks like we have a little bit more time. So I'm going to go for 6. We're going to try. We're going to do this. We're going to make this happen. Okay, so in our starter project, there is a JSON file that's got some additional Pokemon in it. And there is a loader, which basically loads from a file. So you give it a file name, and you give it a class called a record handler that in turn has an add record method on it. And what it does is this loader function then calls that add record for each one of the records in that file. Cool. So what we want to do is adapt, and that's where this is the adapter pattern. We are going to adapt our database to connect to that loader function. So here we go. We got the loader. And where are we going to call it? Let's call it up front. Let's call, right after we initialize the Pokemon DB, let us call loader, and we'll give it the local file name of data.json. Cool. But now we need to give it that record handler class. So let's create a new class called Pokemon DB adapter, and it's going to implement the record handler with Pokemon as our data type. And what we need to do, we need to implement add record. And what's that going to take? Well, it's going to take a record of type T in this case, which is going to be a Pokemon, but we'll specify that anyway. Ooh, wow, that was interesting. Pokemon. And with that, we are just going to call Pokemon DB instance to get our singleton, and then set that incoming record. So this is going to adapt our Pokemon database to our loader system. So all we need to do is create a new one of those and send it off. Let's take a look and see how we do. Okay, so you know what? Let's go and add in our after add value subscription in there, and we'll get rid of a couple other things just so we don't get so much in the console. Okay, cool. Let's run this and see how it do. Cool. Okay, so I brought in Menosaur, Tuphosaur, and Bulbasaur. Those are loaded in by the loader, which has an adapter class to adapt our database to our loader system. And then at the end of this, we went through and we did a visitor pattern where we output every one of their IDs so we can see them all. So that's another cool one. You see adapters a lot when it comes to, if for example, in the React context of doing React components that wrap, third-party JS libraries, things like that. So yes, we don't really call it necessarily the adapter pattern, but we do kind of end up doing that in real life a lot. If we're connecting one library to another, that's when you'd use the adapter pattern. Cool. All right, well, there you go. 6 different design patterns all in one video. Pretty cool. Yeah, if you have any more questions, let me know. I did want to, before kind of wrapping this up, I just want to say, of course, feel free to like and share the video with your friends. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. I added a new thing. You can actually buy me a coffee, which ends up supporting the channel for like SEO research and thumbnail generation and things like that. Kind of the ongoing costs of running this channel. You can do that. There's a link to that in the description. And but besides that, be happy, healthy, and safe. But of course, I'll stick around. If you have any comments or questions, just feel free to put those in the video or in the comments, and you can keep on going for a little bit. DM Design, thanks for all the great resources, Pride, super helpful. Thank you. Sean Carroll. I don't think I've ever heard of Sean Carroll before. I'll have to take a look. All right, cool. I hope he's got a decent voice. Yeah, all right. Any other questions? Was this helpful? Have you guys done any of this? Does it give you a little background on design patterns and why they're useful? Let me know. Drop them in the comments. Okay, well, looks like we're wrapping up. So cool. I'm going to jump on over to the Discord server. You can have a chat with me over here. I'm going to be over in the general pretty soon, and I'll see you over there. All right, bye guys. Have a great